She was alone. The audience never left. You've done it. Don't pretend you haven't. You walked into an empty room and felt the need to look composed. You said something out loud, alone, and immediately thought about how it sounded. You arranged something on your desk before a video call that would never show your desk. There is no camera, there is no audience, and yet the performance continues. In my former life, I tracked behavior under observation. People change when they know they're being watched. They straighten up, speak more carefully, perform. What I didn't expect to find in this office, in this work, was a case where the observation was entirely imaginary. Her name was Sophia, 25 years old, graphic designer, lives alone, funny, self-aware, genuinely creative, and completely unable to exist even in private without an audience watching. Tonight, we open the file on the internal audience, not the followers, not the comments, not the feed, the one that never logs off, who they are, why they formed, and what it costs you every single day to keep performing for a crowd that exists only in your mind. Sophia had a ritual. Every morning before coffee, before the first message, before anything, she rehearsed. Not lines for a presentation, not a difficult conversation, just the day. How she would describe her weekend to a colleague. What she would say if someone asked about the project. How she would react, casually, effortlessly, if her work got praised. She rehearsed reactions to things that hadn't happened yet, for people who hadn't asked. Sophia had prepared 17 versions of the sentence, "Oh, I just threw that together." None of them sounded spontaneous. This is the first evidence in the case. The internal audience doesn't just watch what you do, it scripts what you're about to do. Sophia would record a voice memo, then listen back immediately, not for the content, but to hear how she sounded. She would type a message and rewrite it 4 times, not because it was unclear, but because it wasn't quite the right version of herself. She would cook dinner, and the dinner would look beautiful, and no one would see it, and she would photograph it anyway. I've done this. I've caught myself walking into an empty room with what I can only describe as entrance energy, like I was arriving somewhere. The room was my own kitchen. It was 7 a.m. The audience was a kettle. Here is what psychology tells us about this. The internal audience isn't random. It was assembled, piece by piece, person by person. Usually in childhood or early adolescence, the period when social judgment first becomes existentially threatening. A teacher whose approval mattered, a parent whose reaction you learned to anticipate, a peer group whose standards you internalized so completely that you forgot they were external. They handed you the script. You kept performing it long after they left the room. Psychologists call this the imaginary audience phenomenon. It was first observed in adolescents, teenagers who genuinely believe, that everyone around them is watching and evaluating them constantly. Most people are supposed to outgrow it. Some of us bring it into adulthood and renovate it. Sophia's internal audience had evolved significantly from its original members. It now included her actual friends' upgraded versions, sharper, more critical than in reality. 3 former colleagues she hadn't spoken to in years. A vague composite she called people who have their lives together. And someone she'd never met but whose Instagram she checked every Thursday. The audience in Sophia's head had better seats than she did. They were also considerably harder to impress. But here is where the case gets complicated. The audience was never really about other people. Existentialism has a concept, Sartre's gaze. The moment you become aware that you are being seen, you lose something. You become an object in someone else's world instead of the subject of your own. What Sartre didn't fully account for is the version of this that happens entirely in your own mind. Sophia wasn't performing for her friends. She wasn't performing for her colleagues. She was performing for a version of herself, the version she was afraid she'd never become. The internal audience is not a collection of judges. It is a mirror, an extremely unforgiving mirror, held at an angle that shows only the distance between who you are and who you think you should be. This is why the performance never stops. It's not vanity. It's not insecurity in the simple sense. It is an attempt to close a gap that cannot be closed through performance, because the audience in your head is not watching what you do. It's watching who you are. And who you are is not a performance. It is something that only reveals itself when the performance stops. Stoicism has a name for the version of you that performs for approval. Marcus Aurelius called it the actor's mask, the face you wear because you've forgotten you're wearing it. He wrote, and this is the line that broke Sophia's case open: how much more suffering is caused by the imagination than by reality. The audience in Sophia's head had never once applauded. It had never booed, either. It just watched, in silence, waiting for a performance that would finally be enough. And that silence, that permanent, unresolvable silence, was the real crime. Sophia once spent 40 minutes choosing which version of "I'm doing well, thanks to send." The recipient replied, "Cool. Sophia has not fully recovered from this." Sophia came to me not because something had broken. She came because she'd had a Thursday, an ordinary Thursday where she'd spent 20 minutes deciding how to phrase a message to a friend. Sent it, received the reply, "Haha, yeah," and then sat in her apartment at 9 p.m. wondering why she felt so tired. Not tired from the day, tired from the performance. That sentence appears in almost every case. Different words, same meaning. I don't know why I'm exhausted. I didn't even do that much today. I told her, you did more than you think. You ran a full production. Costumes, lighting, script revisions, audience management. You just did it entirely in your own head. First, identify the audience members. You cannot dissolve an audience you haven't seen clearly. Sit with a notebook. Ask, when I imagine being observed, who specifically is watching? Write the names. All of them. You will find, almost certainly, that several of them are people whose opinion you stopped caring about years ago. People who have no idea they have a permanent seat in your mind. People who, if you called them right now, would be genuinely surprised to learn they were on the guest list. Begin by canceling their reservations. Second, interrupt the rehearsal. The next time you catch yourself pre-scripting a conversation, composing your face before entering a room, or rewriting a message for the 5th time, stop. Not with self-criticism, with curiosity. Ask, who am I performing for right now? What do I think will happen if I stop? The answer is almost always some version of, they will see who I actually am. Good. That is the point. The person you actually are, unscripted, unpolished, unperforming, is the only version of you that can actually connect with another person. Third, practice the private self. 1 hour per day, do something with no audience. Not even the imaginary one. This is harder than it sounds. The first few times you try, you'll notice you're narrating your own experience in your head, describing what you're doing as if for someone watching. And now she makes coffee. She stares out the window. She seems pensive. Sophia realized she had been providing live commentary on her own life for approximately 11 years. Her internal audience, it turns out, was also her internal documentary crew. When you notice the narration, gently end the broadcast. No audience, no commentary. Just you, in the room, being in the room. Sophia started with 10 minutes. 10 minutes of doing something without performing it. Making coffee. Sitting by the window, reading without thinking about how she would describe the book. The first week was uncomfortable. The second week was strange. The third week, she told me, Felt like taking off a coat she hadn't realized she was wearing. The internal audience is not a flaw. Let me be precise about that. It formed for a reason. It kept you safe, socially, relationally, in environments where being seen accurately was dangerous, where the gap between who you were and who you were supposed to be had real consequences. It was a very intelligent adaptation in a context that no longer exists. The problem is not that you have an audience in your head. The problem is that you've kept the theater running. Staff on payroll, lights on, curtain ready, for a show that no longer needs to happen. 3 final moves. 1. Let one thing be ugly. Today, let one thing exist without performance. Send the message without the 5th rewrite. Leave the dinner unphotographed. Enter the room without the entrance. Let something be exactly as it is, unobserved, unjudged, unimproved. Notice that nothing collapses. 2. Name the exhaustion correctly. The next time you feel tired after a day where you didn't do much, update the diagnosis. You did a great deal. You maintained a full production. You wrote, directed, and performed in a show that ran on no sleep and no applause. That is genuinely exhausting. Give yourself the credit, and then consider whether tomorrow's show needs to be quite so elaborate. 3. Find one person to be unperformed with. Not permanently, not dramatically, just one conversation where you say something before you've finished composing it, where you don't know how you'll come across, where you let the other person see a draft instead of a final edit. Real connection does not happen between 2 performances. It happens in the pause between them. Sophia still performs sometimes. She catches herself mid-rehearsal and notices it, the way you notice a song playing in the background after you've been humming it for an hour without realizing. But something changed. She started publishing her work. Not the finished version. Not the one she'd revised 17 times. The version that was ready enough. She told me the comments were not what she'd scripted. Some were better, some were worse. None of them matched any of the 43 responses she'd prepared. The audience, the real one, turned out to be considerably less interested in her performance than the one in her head. It was mostly just interested in her. The internal audience will not fire itself. It has excellent job security, but it can be demoted. From director to background noise, from judge to observer, from the voice that scripts your life to something you occasionally notice and quietly choose to ignore. The show is optional. The self is not.